Good afternoon, ladies and Fallout 4. I'm John, this is Many Fallout 4, and this is Fallout 4. Fallout 4 exists. I'm so happy. I'm genuinely thrilled. Fallout 4 exists. And obviously, the trailer came out today, a much bigger trailer than I was expecting. I was expecting a tiny tease, and we'd actually have to wait until we hit E3 for an actual kind of trailer like of several minutes long. But we got a trailer that was several minutes long. So I just wanted to do a quick go through it and just kind of talk about a few things that I thought were of interest, particularly things that I think kind of give us an indication of the direction of the game that might be interesting. I'm not going to put the whole trailer on my channel. I don't approve of that. I don't like kind of taking someone else's content and re-uploading it to your channel. I think that's wrong. Instead, if you want us to see the full trailer, and I think you should before you watch this, if you haven't already, though I imagine most of you watching have seen it 5 or 6 times, like I have, then there is a link to Bethesda's own version of the video in the description below. Instead, I'm just going to use some screen caps to kind of indicate things that I think are of interest. So firstly, let's have a look at the aesthetic. I think obviously this is a pretty obvious, clear call. The aesthetic of Fallout is remained largely unchanged. They've kept the 1950s thing going on. We've still got the please stand by screen, which shouldn't be a surprise. Of course, that was on the little countdown they were doing as well. But there's a lot of touches that suggest that they want to keep a lot of stuff aesthetically as it ever was in Fallout. Now, I personally think that is a huge relief, because one of the things I was really worried about was they were going to kind of try and completely change Fallout. They were going to, like, you know, make it like a MMO or something. And there's no indication they're going to do that, which is fantastic news. So I'd say, like, from a large number of touches, we've got that they're going to keep a lot of things similar. So, for example, you've got the Radiation King brand still present there at the beginning. I'm going to skip to a scene at the end now because there's loads of little details there. So this is the garage at the end of the scene, and you'll notice there you've got the Vault Boy on the left. You've got very familiar weapons design on the left above the desk there. You've got a Nuka clock stopped at exactly 9:47 as they ever were in Fallout, and as the dog goes outside and you just see a little bit of the sign at the top, I'm guessing we're supposed to indicate that this is a Red Racer garage. So, like, every single little bit of detail, like in terms of like the brands and the background detail, are very Fallouty, which I think is as clear as the developers could do. They're nailing their colours to the wall, that they want to make this a Fallout that's Fallouty and is made for Fallout fans, which I think is fantastic, because I really didn't want them to kind of go changing too much of the aesthetic and the tone and stuff. So going back to the beginning, and obviously a large part of the focus of the opening of the trailer is the dog. A lot of people speculating, because the dog is so prominent, that the dog's going to play a very big part in gameplay. Now, I personally don't think that's necessarily true, because the dog was very prominent in the Fallout 3 trailer as well, yet you never kind of found Dogme in Fallout 3 until you reached Scrapyard, and it was potentially very easy to skip him entirely, and he wasn't a core part of gameplay or a core part of the story. So I think it's too far to say that the dog's prominence in this trailer means he's going to be a big part. I think he could actually be a fairly small part. Potentially, like Dogmeat in Fallout 3, he can in fact be completely optional. So that's kind of interesting. One of the things that we do know is obviously he won't be kind of joining our character permanently, because we can tell that our character is a vault dweller stepping out of the vault, because from the flash of him holding his hand up, we can tell we're going to do the Fallout 3 thing of him leaving the vault for the first time, having never seen the sun before. So unless they also kept a dog in the vault with him, which doesn't seem desperately likely, it's a dog he's going to have picked up in the world, so potentially not even a necessary part of the game, could be entirely optional. Though while we're talking about the dog, great dog animation, by the way. They've done a really lovely job of the dog running and looking around and sniffing. They've really got the mannerisms of a dog. I don't know if they kind of did motion capture for a dog, and therefore if they did, there is footage somewhere in Bethesda HQ of a dog covered in ping pong balls just being encouraged to wander around the offices while they do motion capture. If so, they should release that footage, because that would be marvellous. Now let's talk about the other big thing that's kind of in the opening bit of the trailer, which is these flashes to pre-war, this very, very bright pre-war world, where basically it's telling the story of the news coming in over the radio of the bombs falling and people kind of panicking and desperately trying to rush to the vault, and the bomb hitting them if they didn't make it. Now, a large number of people are speculating that this means that a significant portion of the game is going to be pre-war. I disagree. I think actually Fallout 4 is going to pull a Last of Us, which is we're going to get the introduction is going to be in the world that was, kind of the fall of the world, and then the actual main game will be the post-apocalypse. If I had to stake money on it, I would say that we're going to learn like the movement controls and the basic controls of the game in the pre-war, super beautiful, colourful world. Then the bomb's going to go off, hit us as a main character, the title screen's going to roll, and then the main game's going to begin with us waking up in the vault and having to leave the vault and do whatever it is we need to do. Broken water chip, broken air filtration system, you know, it's Vault. Something will have broken and we'll need to go and fix it. One thing I want to bring up next, colour. Look how much colour there is. It's lovely. I love the kind of the muted colour scheme of Fallout 3. I thought it suited it very, very well. But after kind of the previous generation where there was a vast number of shooters and action RPGs and stuff where everything was a bit grey and brown, I'm thrilled to see that we've got a bit of colour in the world. Like the splash of yellow on the vault door that we've seen, and just the kind of the splashes of colour all over this trailer. I think it's wonderful that we've got a bit of colour in the world, and if this game is colourful, I will be so happy. I'll be so happy if it's not just brown and grey. That'll be marvellous. Next, we just get a snippet of some kind of allies and enemies, and again, I think this is the developers making as clear as possible that they want this to be a familiar Fallout game. There's a lot of familiar faces here. We've got Brahmin, we've got the Brotherhood, we've got vertibirds, we've got ghouls. Interestingly, we've got a Protectron, but it's in yellow, which I'd love to think was kind of a bit more like the design that they had in the pit, because there were yellow Protectrons in the pit, and I really always liked that design. When I first saw them, I actually commented on it because I thought it was a really nice colour for them, so I'm glad that's back at least. So let's talk about the airships in this game, because the airships are awesome. A lot of people have just been commenting how airships are awesome. I think the airships also indicate something quite interesting, which is there's going to be more infrastructure in this game than we're used to, because kind of a plot point in Fallout 2 and 3 is that vertibirds are rare. Literally, the fuel to make them fly is hard to come by. Not many factions can keep an air force. We see only a couple of vertibirds in the whole of New Vegas, one of which belongs to the president of the NCR, another of which is a leftover of the remnants. Vertibirds are not supposed to be common, yet here we are in Fallout 4, and what presumably is the Brotherhood is driving around this massive, great airship, with the implication that there's multiple ships that can fly in this game, just held out in public. This isn't a secret weapon of a military force launching an assault. This is just something that just flies over towns without really bothering, without anything to do, which is very, very interesting. It suggests that there's a faction in the world that's got fuel and power. I think it suggests that there might be more of an organised authority figure in order to have that infrastructure in place than we might be used to. So we could be dealing with a more organised society and less of a bit of a Wild West free-for-all than we're used to, which could be very, very interesting indeed. Now let's talk about the environments, the urban environments that we were seeing. One thing I kind of did notice was I think they look a lot less ruined than in Fallout 3. It looks a little bit more like New Vegas. The city certainly looks in better shape. It looks like plenty of houses have multiple floors to them and plenty of big buildings are still standing. So I don't know whether we're dealing with an environment where the bombs didn't directly hit, or if we're dealing with an element of reconstruction. A close look at a couple of the buildings kind of, I think, gives you a bit of an idea. So, for example, if we look at this building here, I think we can see that that's clearly an old building that's been repurposed for some reason. But if we look here and here, that skyscraper in the background, that doesn't look old world to me. I would say that that looks like that's reconstruction. So I don't know whether we're dealing with a world that's significantly further on from the war than we saw in Fallout 3 or New Vegas, or we're dealing with just a high technology society. Obviously, the kind of the story and the lore around the Commonwealth suggests it may just be this is a high tech society, given we also saw a brief kind of an iBot floating around. So we might just be dealing with a more advanced society that rebuilt of some description. So that's kind of interesting. That's kind of interesting. The environment, by the way, for British people who didn't notice this, I'm told by multiple Americans, is Boston. Americans have identified this because there's a statue of a traitor and turncoat to the crown who warned the cowardly American traitors about the glorious approach of the redcoats. Which is unfortunate, obviously, historically speaking, but apparently that identifies that this was indeed Boston. So now let's just head back to the very end of the trailer, and when the dog, who, well, let's just call him Dog Meat for the sake of convenience, meets up with our Vault Dweller. Again, we've got that beautiful splash of colour, but more important, I think, is the model of the Vault Dweller, because we kind of got a bit of a look at the models of characters in the pre-war bit earlier, and the close-up of the Vault Dweller kind of confirms it. These models are not hyper-realistic, and I'm pretty sure by how openly they show the Vault Dweller, at the end of this trailer. They're not going for hyper-realism. They're going for smooth lines, bright colours, a slightly stylized, almost halfway to Borderlands kind of style in some ways. The dog's the same, by the way. If you look at the dog earlier, the hair is not kind of perfect on him. His fur is not beautiful. It's kind of, it's not kind of individually, it's not beautiful. When you compare it to some of the work that was done in The Witcher 3 recently, the fur on the dog is particularly unimpressive. In fact, I'd say it's probably slightly behind flipping Star Fox Adventures on the GameCube. Now, I personally don't mind that, because I think hyper-realistic graphics are rendered redundant almost immediately by technology, whereas bright, slightly stylized games tend to age very well. So the original Legend of Zelda Wind Waker looks very, very good, but any game that goes for hyper-realism, generally within a couple of years, looks incredibly dated. So I'm kind of glad they're going to go for this slightly stylized look, it looks like. So, you know, more color, slightly stylized, not hyper-realistic. I can go for all of that. And then the final big interesting thing that goes on is the Vault Dweller says something to the dog. He has a voice, which is, some people are speculating about, would I want my Vault Dweller to have a voice? I honestly don't know. I wouldn't kind of put too much into it. I mean, very often, very good quality voice actresses and voice actors are brought in to do trailers who aren't actually going to be in the final game or doing different roles in the final game. And sometimes big voice actors are brought in for very small parts. I mean, Ron Perlman is repeatedly brought in for Fallout and does only a tiny amount of lines per game. So I'd say the fact that Vault Dweller speaks in the trailer doesn't necessarily mean that much. Would I mind if he had a voice? I'd like to have a choice of voices. I'd like Saints Row style to have a choice of voices so I can pick the voice I want. In many ways, I've always kind of treated the Vault Dweller and Fallout. I've always thought it's a fantastic game for role-playing and kind of putting your own opinions and views onto the Vault Dweller. So I'm kind of hoping that they don't have voice acting in some ways, because I'd like to be able to choose the read lines as I wished, but I wouldn't mind terribly if it did. But I'd like a choice. I would like a choice. So there we are. I'd say that's all we can really pull out of Fallout 4 for now, or at least just a few things I wanted to pull out. As I say, full trailer in the description below. Now, while we're on the topic of Fallout, I'm going to do a much bigger video on Fallout 4 this Saturday. And what that video is going to be about is, rather than looking at this trailer and deciding what I do and don't like in this trailer, I'm going to be looking back at the Fallout of the last generation, of the whole of Fallout 3 and the whole of Fallout New Vegas, and trying to figure out what I did and didn't like in those games, and thus what I would and wouldn't like to see in Fallout 4. So it's going to be a much bigger discussion piece about stuff that needs to change, stuff I want to stay the same. And I'd love that to be a great big community discussion. I'm going to be very active in the comments on that. So watch out for that on Saturday, and I do hope you decide to come take part in that discussion group then. But yes, I think that will do for now. Just let's conclude by just saying Fallout 4 exists. It exists, and we have all seen the trailer for it. Magnificent. Yes, but brilliant. I look forward to that on Saturday. And in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, I've been John. This has been Many a True Nerd, and this has been my quick look at the Fallout 4 trailer. Thank you very much, and goodbye.